If you're thinking of having solar installed, you'll want to avoid these costly mistakes. From accreditations to installations, I'm going to give you all the things you'll want to avoid. Let's go. I really don't want you to make any mistakes, and I really don't want you to pick the wrong installer when it comes to selecting solar panels or battery storage for your home. I must get one phone call a week about my first point here, and I'm deeply passionate about this. So many people don't pick an MCS accredited installer. They don't realise the importance of it. They assume that just like you do a DIY project and you may well install a double socket, you can just get the local electrician to come and sign it off. The actual accreditation that we get as installers prevents us from signing off other people's work. So it's not awkward installers that are saying, oh, I can't be bothered, I'm not interested in signing off. Instead, not using an MCS accredited installer could end up costing you financially. Let me explain briefly what the MCS is, the Micro Generation Certification Scheme. What they do is go around and individually test the components that are involved in solar systems to make sure that they're at a high standard. What that means is the hooks, the rails, the solar panels, and now the battery storage as well, are all under the MCS accreditation scheme, including the installers. So essentially, at the end of the installation, you would get a certificate that says all the parts and components have been used and it's been installed by someone who's registered, competent, that knows exactly what they're doing. Your energy supplier will then take that certificate and that'll enable you to be able to get export payments so you can get paid for that solar generation from the grid. Without the MCS certificate, you cannot get export payments. And there are another few things that you need to be aware of as well. This could well prevent you from selling your home in the future. Now, I don't want this to seem like scaremongering in any way, shape or form, but you really do need to do your due diligence to make sure that the company isn't just claiming to be an MCS accredited installer. Instead, they actually are. Good for you, the fact that this is really easy to check. You can go on the MCS website, you can check the components that they're quoting that they're going to use and make sure they have the right certification number. And you can also make sure that your MCS or claimed MCS accredited installer is actually registered on the database. Now, there are two things you need to check on there. The fact that they're registered for solar panels and that they're also registered to install battery storage if you're thinking of using and utilising that as a technology. As I say, I must get one phone call at least a week in our office of people saying, can you sign my system off? The answer to that is no, you can't. As soon as you've picked your installer, if they are not accredited, you will not be able to get another installer to sign your system off. Please do me a favour and make sure you check this properly. Second costly mistake that's so easy just to prevent against is making sure your installer is registered with either the RECC or HIES. It's perfectly acceptable to be registered with either one of these two. So unlike the MCS, where there's only a one-stop shop, you can actually be registered with either. The RECC and HIES are certification bodies that essentially dictate how solar is sold. The idea is if you're registered with one of these certification bodies that you're saying, as a company, we promise to hold ourselves to the highest possible standard. We're not going to come into your home and say, well, the price was £10,000, but actually, if you sign up today, it's going to be £7,000. It just holds those standards in place. It makes sure people aren't in your home for long and projected periods of time as well. So it's just a really good thing just to check off the fact that they're registered with either the HIES or RECC. The third point is establishing the actual company that's coming and installing your solar system. You're probably bombarded with different adverts now. As soon as you click on an advert, well, that's it. You've seen loads of it on your Facebook wall or your other social media platforms. Different prices, different batteries, and it's a bit of a confusing place. The one thing you want to have a look at, and cut past the price for a second, is establishing if they're just a sales company. You want to make sure that the people selling it and the people installing it are together in-house, they're the same team. Don't let them just hoodwink you. Speak with prior clients that have worked with them, check out reviews, and don't just take their word for it. It's really important to have that connection that sits together and that symbiotic relationship, because if anything goes wrong, you stand a much better chance of getting problems sorted out and having that peace of mind in the back of your mind that 2 or 3 years time, if it all goes wrong and something breaks, that they can come back and get it sorted for you. The fourth costly mistake that people regularly make is assuming that just the MCS is a suitable level of registration to be able to sign solar systems off. That's where you could go wrong, because there are two aspects to a solar system. Aspect number one is the solar panels, the cabling that goes for it, and the inverter. And aspect number two is the electrical side to the installation. This is where registrations with certification bodies like the NICEIC or NAPIT, you'll see on my arm there, NICEIC, you might recognize the logo. You're making sure that the electrical aspect of things that they're registered to. So this is things like the distribution unit fuse board, as you may well know it. The cabling that goes to the inverter is also suitably signed off as well. So it's really important that you make sure that the installer is registered with them. You can simply go on to either the NICEIC or NAPIT website, do your due diligence and just double check the fact that they're registered. So another reason why you want to make sure your installer is registered with the NICEIC or NAPIT is building control notifications. So you have a registered competent person scheme, simply a portal that your installer, if they're registered, can go onto to notify local building control that you've had new distribution unit fitted, fuse board, or you've had new solar panels installed as well. So a couple of boxes and forms that your installer will fill out. Building control notification goes to the local council, and what that means when you come to sell your property in the future, that effectively it's been done to building control standards. Building control don't come in, it's the fact that your installer is a high enough standard to be able to certify it themselves. That's what that registration's all about. There's also another aspect to being either NICEIC registered or NAPIT registered, and that's to be able to do a grid notification. I've referred to these in other videos, but I'll just give you a brief summary. You either get what's called a G98 or a G99 notification, and this basically puts the national grid. We're in the Northwest, so we have Electricity Northwest. You could have Scottish Power. There are a few different bodies that you can notify with, but that makes sure they're registered to make that connection onto the grid. So when you export energy, you're not going to damage the local supply network effectively. So that's also the reason why you want to make sure that they're appropriately registered. There's so much to go through today, and you might be getting a little bit overwhelmed with all the things you've got to check off. We've curated a really handy checklist that I'm going to include in the description below. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. The fifth most costly mistake that I've come across people making is, so they've checked everybody's registered, but they've not checked that they're actually registered with the manufacturer that they're being quoted for. So a really important thing to check out is not only that your installer has done a few of these installations before with that manufacturer, but that they're actually registered, they've been through the manufacturer's appropriate training, so they're selecting the correct protective devices, the right cabling for the installation, and ultimately you're retaining the all-important manufacturer's warranty that you may well wish to lean on in the future. Now, you also want to be able to get the most from and maximise your system as well. Another problem with installers that jump around between products and don't really have their niche that they're involved in is they often can't make recommendations of how to wring the cloth and get the most out of that product. Things like setting up your system alongside cheap night buying tariffs, things like the demand flexibility service, so selling energy out to the grid when you can get a premium for it. They're just not going to be able to get you the best possible return on investment, and I really think that could be a costly mistake for you and ultimately increase your return on investment time. You want to get that as low as possible. The sixth most costly mistake is overpaying for the product you're having installed. I think you need to reverse engineer the way you're getting your quotes. So the first thing you want to do is kind of pick a few installers that you quite like the look of, and then pick the products that you want to have installed. So I get so many people kind of approach me going, we've got a cheaper price. Yeah, but if you've got a really cheap subpar manufacturer, of course you're going to get a cheaper price. First of all, vet your installer. Second of all, choose your product. Then find 3 installers that are going to install you the same product. Then compare your cost and look to kind of then hone in and try and negotiate the best possible position for you in terms of the physical costs themselves. And like anything, you know, there may well be economies of scale with bigger companies. Equally, you're probably going to get better service from more local companies as well. So that's about you toying that up in your mind. But it's a really bad idea to just get quotes and be like, oh, well, they've got this brand and they've got this brand. Well, they're cheaper. Of course they will be. So just be careful you don't get kind of hooked in the line and focus too much on your price. Instead, focus on your product. Get the right thing for you, because a cheap price now will probably prove to be quite costly later. We've done a whole video actually on comparing products and proposals so that you can get really into the nitty gritty. I'll dash a link in the description below so you can kind of take a deep dive into that particular section. I appreciate I've just done a brief synopsis on it now. The 7th point I wanted to make was choosing cheap technology. So just the same as you can get cheap and dumb EV car chargers, you can get really intelligent chargers. It works the same way when it comes to solar and battery storage. Technology is rolling around at quite a phenomenal speed, and what you don't want to do is buy technology from 2-3 years ago that's just really cheap and not going to serve you for the purpose of the future. There are so many smart integrations you can now make to push your bills even further down, not just relying upon the solar panels, but relying upon cheap nighttime storage, looking at weather forecasting. You just want to make sure that you're not buying a dumb inverter, and that for the sake of a couple of £100 more, you could just invest in the latest technology that's just going to provide you such better returns on your investment. Over or undersizing an inverter. This is quite a complex topic, but I'm going to try and keep it as short and sweet as I possibly can. If you've got 10 solar panels, each one being 440 watts, that would give you 4.4 kilowatts of generation. If you installed a 3.6 kilowatt inverter, as soon as it gets sunny, 0.8 kilowatts is just going to go straight in the bin. Now, a little bit of oversizing of an inverter is perfectly normal. 25% is quite typical, but if you get vastly bigger, if I now put 20 440 watt panels, an 8.8 kilowatt system, and I put that on a 3.6 kilowatt inverter, it would throttle your generation and you would throw pretty much over 5 kilowatts of generation straight in the bin. Make sure the number of solar panels and amount of generation that's expected intrinsically links with the inverter size that you're going to pick, because otherwise you might think you're generating energy and actually you're not. The 9th most costly mistake is what I call the G98 loophole. These big industrial installers, the massive national ones, want to focus on you like a production line, cha-chunk, 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 trying to get installations out the door as fast as possible with the biggest margins going. And I firmly disagree with the way in which some of these installers do it. Allow me to briefly explain. What they will do is go, sure, Mrs. Jones, you can have 20 solar panels, that's no problem, but we need to limit your export to 3.68 kilowatts under G98. You as the end user, should I say, have no idea what that means. And what happens is you've got a glorious sunny day, 8.8 kilowatts is being generated in the air, but your inverter starts throttling the generation out to the grid, and the return on investment you thought you were getting is impeded by the inverter size or the restrictions that they're placing on it, because it makes their life simpler. If you're going for a system that's more than 3.68 kilowatts, typically speaking 8 solar panels or more, make sure you're asking the question for your installer to put in what's called a G99 application. This is going to stop any inverting being restricted out to the grid and maximise your return on investment. A very simple one, no bird protection. I've seen firsthand, and I've had many customers call us quite upset when they've got a ruck of birds all underneath their solar array. They're pooing absolutely everywhere, And it's so hard to stop once they're in. You're getting the scaffolding up, you're having pest control coming in to remove the birds safely. Bird protection does not harm animals, it just simply prevents them from making underneath your solar panels their warm, cosy home. You want them to make that instead in the local trees, not on your new investment. So even if it's just the basic mesh, make sure you include bird protection. I would recommend the price for this to be about £30 or £40 a panel for basic bird protection. It's not expensive. It's way more expensive to do it at a later date. Don't make that costly mistake. Low quality solar panels. With so many different brands, it can get quite confusing to pick the right solar panel. And so many people get hung up on wattage. Wattage is important. You kind of think a couple of years ago, we were installing 350 watt solar panels. If you go back to the start of my career, it was 220 watt solar panels. The most common wattage now is about 440 watts or above. There's some basic things that I can get you to check. If you want to get a deep dive, again, I've done another in-depth video on how to compare individual types of solar panels. So if you find the following description a little bit confusing, don't worry, I have broken it down in a bit more detail. You have monofacial panels that are great for in-roof solar systems. We have bifacial panels that have solar cells on the front and back. If you're going for an on-roof solar system, my suggestion would be now, with the prices getting commoditized and almost being the same, to just go for a bifacial panel as standard. If you're in-roof, as I say, monofacial panels. There are also new technologies emerging. I would suggest going for an N-type panel. Ignore P-types, they're the old stock, and you want to go for monocrystalline. I appreciate that's a quick fire method of being able to vet out your solar panels. As I mentioned, there will be a link in the description below for an in-depth review of all the things that you can find out about different types and styles of solar panels. But don't get bought out with last year's stock. You want to be investing and future-proofing yourself and avoid making a silly, costly mistake for the sake of a couple of £100. Stand outside, look at your roof, and if you know the age of it, this is really handy, because you want to make sure in your mind that this roof is suitable for the next 25 years to have solar on. The costly mistake that I come across regularly is where basically someone's come and rushed the process, they've had solar panels installed, and effectively they're taking it back off again because some simple repairs that could have been done in advance and could have just been picked up before the installation weren't done. The end users then repaying for scaffolding, repairs. One of the most common misperceptions is that roofers, a local roofer, will just come and take the solar panel off. They won't, or a lot of time they won't. They'll rely upon an accredited solar installer to come and actually have them remove them off while they do the work, and you're paying all these fees, costs and charges. So to kind of summarise, the thing that I would do in that scenario is, if you're confident it'll last 25 years because it's been re-roofed a couple of years ago, great. If it's a bit of an older roof, don't just take your installer's word for it. Go and get a local roofer and have a good look round it. You can't see daylight through the felt. None of the tiles are missing or displaced. The pointing on the top of your ridge is in good condition, because simple repairs now could prove a little bit costly later if they're not picked up early. Point 13, unlucky for some, but hopefully lucky for you, is the fact that you want to be making sure that your MCS approved installer is bobbing their head up in the loft. That might seem like a weird thing to do. And at this point in time, I know I mentioned previously about the roofer. I don't want you to distrust MCS approved installers. If you've been through that accreditation scheme, it's really vigorous in terms of the paces that they put you through to make sure you know what you're doing ultimately. And you can't get accredited without having that. But it's always good just to get that second, third party opinion on your roof, just to make sure. Get your MCS accredited installer to check your roof internally as well. You want to be doubly, trebly checking this off. Once it's installed, you want it to sit there for 25 years and not give you any grief at all. Last but not least is Aftercare. Ask the question, what they do when it comes to aftercare. How do they process aftercare problems. Who do they have working in their aftercare team? So many installers are so hell-bent on getting the next installation done that they're not focusing on the aftercare aspects. And it may well be little things like I've mentioned before. Say a tile does slip off in the wind. These things happen. You want to make sure that they've got the team there that can come back and do little odd jobs if they're needed. Or if the battery goes wrong, that they're going to contact the manufacturer for you and just get the problem wrapped up and sorted. The final thing you can do is check out which trusted traders, which, as you know, they're not going to align themselves with a bunch of clowns. They come in, they check the MCS accreditations for you. They check that the installer is insured, that they're registered and they're qualified to be an installer as well. So you'll see which trusted trader on my arms here. There are many which trusted traders all up and down the UK that have been independently vetted and verified. This isn't an advert for which, by the way, this is just something I feel deeply passionate about because they hold the bar of standards really, really high. Thanks for watching the video today.